Guys, what's up? This is the McAllister's podcast. I'm your host, always, Cole McAllister. Sorry for the delay. I've been having issues with my YouTube account I've been getting emails all day saying I wasn't eligible for certain things, and I gave my ID and then I got another. So something is fucky with my YouTube account. I don't know what's going on. So after this, I'm just streaming to X right now. So for those of you on X, thank you for tuning in. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to re-upload this onto YouTube later. So I apologize for that, even though I announced it everywhere and all that. Gotta love technology. Gotta love technology, people. It's the reason we're here, right? It's the reason we're all here. Okay, but guys, sorry, I'm a little... This whole thing got me all flustered and everything. My cats are annoying. Great start to the week. So anyways, I thought I would start this episode off with a little bit of housekeeping, some unfortunate news. I may have posted about this earlier on Facebook, but haven't really talked about it much on this podcast or whatever because, I was kind of waiting to announce it. I didn't really know the situation, but I mean, everything's been clear and cut dry, so I'll just say it. The Unhinged, Uncensored podcast is no more. This isn't a joke. This isn't a get. This is legit. Essentially, I'm not going to get into the drama, the scuffle, you try to paint anybody in a bad light. That's not my thing, even if I wanted to do that. So I'll just say we had creative differences in terms of how the podcast was going to operate and all that. So I think we all just kind of decided that it would be best to just go our separate ways in terms of this podcast. I really hope for Lolo and Austin, I really hope they come back on this show, the McAllister Hours. I really hope that we can continue to have a friendship and a professional correspondence, etc. But this is sad. I want to say that off the bat. This is very sad. It's something that's been causing me a lot of personal grief and strife. Wondering if I could have done something better. I don't know, but it is what it is. And I think ultimately, as they say, as the old proverb says, all good things must come to an end. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the ride that we had on that show, the fun that we had in that show, we made some great content. And I think we really had an edge to us. And it was really a way for, I think, all of us to just kind of shoot the shit. What I do here in the McAllister Hours is I try to report on what's going on, which is what we're going to do today. Or, just talk to people in the community and, outside of the community, out in the, the greater Iowa and the Midwest and all that. But that was just kind of a fun way to just get together with a group of guys, sometimes with ladies, and just, like I said, dice it up, shoot the shit. And it's unfortunate that that is not going to be there in that platform, but I hope that's something that can still be had on the McAllister Hours. So, and I think this is a new chapter. I'm just kind of looking at this is a new chapter. This is just my signal that, okay, the things we do here in the McAllister Hours podcast, I'm going to be taking it more seriously. I'm going to be doing more weekly, or not weekly, more episodes throughout the week. We're going to be actually putting out members only content. I know I've been saying that forever, but it's actually going to happen. And we're going to keep doing the game streams. So if you like what we do, make sure to like and subscribe and all that. And yeah, let's get into the real stuff. Let's get into the good stuff, right? I actually fucked everything up here because I was flustered trying to figure out the best way to set this all up. Okay, the thing that I really wanted to talk about today, obviously, is in Iowa, for those who don't know, we've had Republican Kim Reynolds in the office forever. I mean, this is, I think she was going to seek a third term. She decided not to because she gave a list of bullshit reasons, but essentially she decided that because in a poll she was not only ranked dead last in terms of like how I think it was just how the approval ratings in general of the states, all the different states, all 50 states. Not only did she rank last in that, she was the only governor to lose support. The only one, literally the only, which is shocking. You know, I said before, like, I think if she had been like one of 3, maybe one of 5, she probably would still be in this race. But the fact that it was so like the fact that like the target was just so glaringly put on her, really, in my mind, she should have resigned that day. But like, this is at least a win, right? That like this awful woman that we've been having to deal with as governor. And I'll just to remind everybody again, like, not somebody who was elected, somebody who was handpicked by Terry Branstad, the governor previous to her, when he got promoted to, I can't remember, one of Trump's cabinet positions, or positions in the federal government or whatever. And she was just handpicked, selected into that slot. So she never even came into the governor position by an electoral, like by a vote. So that's obviously very concerning for a lot of reasons. Anyways, so this election cycle, obviously there's a lot of eyes on it. There's a lot of, people wondering what's going to happen. And one governor that I find very interesting is Rob Sand, who is from the Democratic Party. Not only has he done a lot of stuff in government, he was a state auditor, and he did a lot to kind of point out the corruption in, I can't remember if it was education or if it was, I should really know that. I think it was either in education or something with law enforcement. I'm probably talking out my ass. He did something, he played a significant role in uncovering some fraud over the last, I think it was 2022, maybe, no, 2018. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it was 2018. So he's been in government. He's been, and he broke the record. I don't know if it's for governor period, but at the very least for Democrat governor. He broke the record in funds raised. Last time I checked, I think he had raised $8 million. So, I mean, whatever you want to say about that, that's very impressive. Obviously, this guy has a lot of traction. There are a lot of people who are riling behind him. They really have a lot of positive things to say about him. And look, I know I've titled the episode the way I have, and, obviously, especially him being a Democrat, although I'm an anarchist, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I equally hold criticism from both, but there's something in particular about the Democratic Party I think I tend to focus on because whether intentionally or not, I think a lot of the Democratic policies and ways that they think about government actually hurt people more than the other way around. It's apples and oranges at the end of the day. Like, either party's going to fuck you over, right? But there's something about like the guise of the Democratic Party that I think is worth putting extra attention to. But regardless of all that, I do think that there are some things that are very promising about him. The number one thing in my mind is he is the first governor candidate that I can remember, besides Rick Stewart, who has proponent. I didn't say that right. Who has put forth the stance that he's going to legalize cannabis. Maybe not. I don't think that was his specific verbiage, but on this podcast that we're going to dissect a little bit, he went on the Pints and Diplomacy podcast, a local podcast here, and he talked about a lot of different things. And one of the things that he mentioned was he thought that we should treat cannabis like alcohol. Obviously I'm not, it'll be curious to see, what the plans are for taxing that or whatever. But I think, given the state of how things have been, over the last, really forever, but especially the last 10 years, where you see state after state surrounding Iowa, legalizing cannabis, creating markets for cannabis, and Iowa just is set in its ways because of, whatever reason. You can speculate whether that's Kim Reynolds' involvement in the alcohol industry or the bribes that she's getting from that, or if it's just, this old Republican Iowa way of thinking where it's a gateway drug, whatever. You can surmise what the reason for that is, right? But there's something really promising about the fact that Rob Sand has taken this stance. I think that's very positive. So I want to say, I want to list off the things that I actually think that are really positive about him before I kind of get into the weeds a little bit. Also, I think his role in tackling government corruption, I think, is very promising. Especially from a state that is like almost to this point, like notoriously just so corrupt, so just soaked in, private interests. Not that, I don't think having private interests in like at face value is bad, but when you mix it in with government, when you have corporations that are going to profit or expand their reach based on the laws that are passed in government, that's obviously problematic. So the fact that he has actually taken stances to combat this, not even like projecting and, criticizing the corruption. I think anybody could do that, right? But the fact that he actually, in a government position, actually uncovered a lot of the fraud, he took action, right? And, you can say whatever you want about that, but I think for any time that government moves the needle in a positive direction, I think that's worth congratulating. I think it would have been very easy for someone like Rob Sand to see the corruption and just say, oh, you know what? Like, they're still giving me a paycheck. Like, I could just, whatever. I'm just not even going to think about this, right? Like, it'd be very easy to do that. But I think it's worth commending that this man did do that. I think that's very positive. I really like that. So, right off the bat, those are a couple things that I really like about Rob Sand. And I want to say also, before I get into this, I have reached out to him via Twitter. We interacted briefly. I've been sending emails to his team. I haven't really got anything back. If he sees this, or if anybody on his team sees this, I really hope that he would consider doing an interview with me. I know, in this, I'm going to maybe nitpick some of the things that he said, but like, I'm a fair interviewer. I'm not someone who is going to have a gotcha moment. Like, I'm not interested in any of that. You won't see the do-rag, okay? Like, it's going to be a straight up thing. I really hope he and his team consider that. Because I am very interested in this person. I think despite me disagreeing with some of the stances or whatever, I do think that, like, overall, I'll say this. I think he would be better than Kim Reynolds. In terms of him as a governor, as a person, I think 100% he would be better than Kim Reynolds. Some of the things he may pass as a Democratic candidate, I'm not sure. I guess let me just say this overarching point before I get into the weeds. I think the problem with Democratic candidates is they tend to rely, not even tend to, it's in their MO to rely on public funds or public whatever. And we're going to talk about this in some of the clips and some of the articles you shared, but he does proponent a lot of those public entities to quote unquote help people. And, this is something we talk about in the show a lot, so I don't want to be a dead horse, but like, I think when you have that perspective, when you have that initiative, it's actually very short-sighted. I think even if it, ends up helping some people in the short term, you really have to think like, okay, why are they in this position in the first place? Like, why are there people in poverty? Why are there people who are behind in education? And it is because the same entity, the public system, causes inflation, is a system predicated on theft and violence, and does nothing to help the public. It actually squeezes a dollar and makes everything more expensive. So even if you're going to allocate the stolen funds or like the inflation and like the inflated dollars into one of these programs, it may help in the short term on paper, like in the view, but like you go down the road 5-10 years, everything's going to be more expensive. Everything's going to be lower quality. I think this is something, you look at any city, any major city that has a strong Democratic, governor or people in government. Like if it's blue, just for lack of a better term, if it's a blue state, you all constantly, time and time again, you see this. You see their cities have more poverty. Their cities are, there's more corruption. It's more expensive to live there. And this all correlates with a Democratic. Let's actually pull this up really quick. Because I thought this was interesting. This was shared by Kim Reynolds. So, as much as I don't like her, I think like the source at least is credible, right? This is a map of U.S. home affordability by state. And this was the case. I think I remember doing a report on this actually when I was in college. Like, I think this was the case like 5 years ago, and to see it's still the case is shocking, honestly. But Iowa is the number one most affordable state in the country. Now, if you look at the other states here, and can I blow this up? Yeah, I can blow it up a little bit here. If you look at the other states here, and this isn't the case for all of them. I mean, like Montana has it's actually the least affordable in Montana. And that is probably a red wing or a red government per se, right? But, I think a lot of that too, it's not also not all that, right? Like, if think of Montana in terms of like the wildlife and the terrain, like there are plenty of other factors, right? And that's not my point. I'm not saying it's just a Democratic governor or democratically popular area, but I think it is worth to mention that there is a correlation in that. I think you see a lot of times when you have governments that are right-leaning, they tend to be more affordable. For better or worse. There's definitely plenty of Republican policies that I don't like, but I think at the end of the day, they do produce less taxes than the Democratic Party. Both are bad, but Republicans do tend to make less taxation, for better or worse. Not really. They still do it way worse. They still do it poorly, and they still... there are plenty of areas where I shouldn't even say that they tax less. They tax in a way that hurts the American dollar less and hurts the people less. Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying, bro? So anyways, so there's that. So that's kind of just like my feeling about this. That's like kind of the warning sign that I find like when there is a Democratic governor. I mean, despite all that, I still like Rob Sand, but there are a couple things I want to kind of nitpick. So, honestly, so there was this article that this was a couple weeks ago. So, or actually this was about 2 weeks ago he posted this. He posted this article, which we'll read it here. Food insecurity rises in Iowa. 385,000 residents face hunger. Which is a valid concern. I'm not trying to underplay this by any means. I mean, look, poverty is a thing. Inflation has been going up, and people are facing that, and that's a problem, right? However, okay, so let's read this a little bit. A new Feeding America study using 2023 data shows that food insecurity is rising across all 99 counties in Iowa, affecting nearly 400,000 residents, including 120,000 children. Annette Hacker from the Food Bank of Iowa said, based on what we're seeing heading into times that may well be tougher than COVID was for food banks. Hacker emphasized that it would take 73 million meals to ensure Iowans have enough to eat, citing stagnant wages and federal cuts as contributing factors. Okay. See, and this is this is the thing that a lot of Democrats will do, a lot of establishment people will do, is they will cite the problem to be budget cuts. They'll say because the government is cutting the budget for feeding or for food, like the food, the welfare program, what SNAP benefits, whatever, that therefore people are starving. And I think I don't even want to say devious, but in a way, it's just, you're painting the picture incorrectly. You're saying that the problem is that these cuts are being made, right? What the problem really is that these programs exist in the first place. The problem is that we have welfare programs. And that is contributing to inflation. That is contributing to the dollar being devalued. And that is what's really contributing to people not having money in their pockets. It's an incorrect argument in my mind to think that when you see something that's actually happening, that is actually problematic, to then say, okay, we just need more government. And let's just go back to where this was his response to the article, which was, I can fucking switch it. When you reject tens of millions to feed hungry Iowans, this is the result. So, I mean, clearly casting the flag as being like, we're going to put more money in welfare. We're going to put more money in SNAP and these welfare programs, which I think people like me would reject that and say, okay, like it sounds really nice to, put it on a gold platter and say, hey, we're going to give more money to these people. But you're not actually giving money to those people. You're actually devaluing the dollar. You're actually taking money away from the public and making everything more expensive. Even if you disperse that money and for a short amount of time, people, have that money and they're like, okay, now I have more money to buy groceries. Like in 2-3 years, that money's going to be worth even less. So then you're just going to continue the cycle until you get to the point where you see these cities like Los Angeles and Sacramento, where, I mean, the welfare bubble is gone to a point where like it's so fucking expensive to live there. Everybody's homeless. Not everybody. Most of the people are homeless. All you have to do is Google Skid Row to know that, oh my God, this is like a dystopian nightmare. Those things happen because of the same stuff that he's posting about. Whatever. I'm not even going to get too in the weeds on that because that's just kind of typical Democratic stuff, right? One thing I really wanted to pick apart here, which look, as much praise as I want to give this guy, because I do think, like I said, I do think he is one of the most interesting governors that we've had in a long time. This was something I heard on the Pints and Diplomacy podcast. He did a live episode where I don't know what bar it was, but he basically did a live podcast with these guys at a bar, and they talked about a lot of different things. They talked about, ranging from, fun stuff to serious stuff, right? It was actually a really interesting episode. But there's one moment in this that really stuck out to me as just being like, God damn it, like he really got this wrong, and I can't help but think he intentionally got it wrong to kind of sell his ticket. You know what I mean? So let's just play it. We don't have any video, so we're just going to listen to audio, but this is from the when did this aired? May 15th. So this is from the Pints and Diplomacy podcast. And I know a lot of this stuff is kind of a couple weeks ago. I've been recovering this last week with the sickness, so I haven't really been able to podcast. So I'm a little behind on all this stuff. I think it's still relevant. So let's just play this.
That you can't do with that money. These are tax dollars, okay? And this is what people who support this program, the way it is currently enacted, don't want you to know, all right? They talk about school choice. What that means currently in the state of Iowa is that private schools choose their students.
And actually, before we even get into this, I do want to say, so the thing he is talking about is what is it called? It's the Iowa... Damn it, they don't have the chapters up. Oh, no, they do right here. It's the... What the hell? The Iowa School Voucher Program, which this is something that I actually... Overall, I agree with the stance on, which is like, we shouldn't be giving money to these private schools. I agree with that 100%. Like, yeah, no, you definitely shouldn't be like, whatever private school like shouldn't be. I mean, they shouldn't be getting additional tax money, right? Like, I actually agree with him on that. But he could have gone about this like from a perspective where it's like, we shouldn't do that. But then he did the same thing that every Democrat candidate does, which they just sidestepped into this position that like makes the problem. Like, I agree with the first part, but then the second part is just so wrong. Anyways, so I just wanted to say that off the bat, like the thing he is talking about, like I do agree that we should get rid of that, but he goes the completely opposite direction with it. Let's actually just skip back a little bit.
Tax dollars, okay? And this is what people who support this program, the way it is currently enacted, don't want you to know, all right? They talk about school choice. What that means currently in the state of Iowa is that private schools choose their students. That's what that means. If it meant that you actually got to choose where you wanted to go, then it would be a requirement that in order to take public money, you had to take the public as your students, right? It also would mean...
Okay, first, what? What? This was just so shocking to me. The idea that schools choose their students. Okay, look at there's nothing in the real world that even remotely pictures this or paints this picture. Look, I coming from a family where me and my siblings did go. I mean, not all the time. I think my younger sisters actually did it more than me, but like did go to private institutions. Those institutions did not pick us. They did not like come to our door and be like, "Hey, you're going to our school right now." If any school does that, it's the public schools. It's, oh, you live in this area, so this is the school that you're going to go to. Unless you want to pay for private, which everybody knows is expensive. Like I'm not disagreeing with that point. But the reason that private school is so expensive is because there's the only other option is this public option that is terrible. I mean, he even goes on later to say like, or I guess earlier in the episode, he talked about like how Iowa has dropped to like 26th tier. Like you really think that's because you think what? That's because private schools who statistically have like better numbers than public schools, like you think that what, because they're getting more money that's why it's getting worse? Like no, it's the complete opposite. It's because if anything, I think in my opinion, I think it's just because education has been devalued in general. But like if anything, that has to do with the public sphere, it has nothing to do with the private sector. And if there was an actual free market of education, you would see other schools operate at a cheaper price. Like the problem would solve itself. I was listening to this podcast. It was actually the Brett Weinstein, Michael Mouse podcast where they're talking about anarchy. And I think this applies to schools as well. He framed it as like, okay, if you had, they're talking about the post office or like the mailing system, I guess. If you had UPS, FedEx, USPS, whatever, all the companies if you had them all come together and say, okay, we're all going to charge, if you want an overnight package, we're all going to charge $1,000. What would happen next? And the answer is a new business would come and say, hey, we're actually going to do this for cheaper because there's a market. And if you had a free market of education, that same thing would happen. The problem is when you have this public sphere that offers it for free, that actually takes away the value of the school, that is the problem. And so, and he kind of gets into this more later, but like, I just thought at face value, that was just really disingenuous. Like in what planet do schools pick students? If that's accurate to anything, it's the public sphere. No private school is like going around and like picking students. It's such a bizarre, and the fact that like nobody even calls this out. And no shade to the guys who are doing the podcast. Like, I reach out to them as well. I really hope that they want to discuss, talk with me or like come on this show as well. but like the hosts are, public school teachers. So it's not surprising that they're not going to challenge him on any of this. That's their vested interest. That's fine. I don't even really have a problem with that. But like, this is just such a glaring thing from that interview that I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. But anyway, let's keep playing.
That in order to, if you wanted to really have school choice, that you would put tuition increase limits on the program. So that you were saying, well, this money is so that these kids can actually afford to attend school here. We're not just giving you money so you can double the price of tuition. They didn't do that either. And
okay, pause it. If you really wanted to make school cheaper, you would get rid of the public system. And that's an extreme step. I'm not saying that he's capable of doing that. I'm not saying anybody in the Republican Party is doing that. But the answer is not to give more money to the public sphere. Like, if you really want to make things cheaper, and he knows this, he probably knows this. Like, if you really want to make things cheaper, the answer is not to give it to the public sphere. The answer is to open up the market, free up the market. I'm being a dead horse with this, but like, unregulated markets get cheaper over time. Regulated markets get more expensive over time. There's multitudes of data to show that. So anyways, let's just keep playing.
Are they really about student choice? Or is that just a nice phrase? Because it doesn't explain the program very well. They say they're about competition. Well, let's talk about competition. If the Packers and the Bears...
Go Packers.
Okay, sorry. I keep interrupting, but like, I love how he sidesteps his point that he makes, which I mean, I don't think is a very good point, but like, it's at least like a logical, like academic point, right? In a sense. And then he just sidesteps into like, we're going to go into the sports teams analogy. Like, this is like the only way like these drunk Iowans can actually understand what's going on. I just thought that was funny, but anyways.
Okay, I needed somebody.
I'm a Dolphins fan, so I have no...
We're going to stick with the Packers and the Bears. Sorry. I don't know where you came from on that one.
Yeah.
Tyler, we'll just go back to having our conversation.
I'll exclude him. Can I get another beer?
Beer him.
Gills Pills.
If you have... Oh, Gills Pills. Okay. Yeah. My friend Kathy would appreciate that. I'll tell her to listen to the podcast. If the Packers and the Bears are playing on Sunday, and the Bears get to play with their roster that they pay tens of millions of dollars to every single year that they drafted, but the Packers on Saturday night are literally just going to be like, all right, sit down in Saturday night in one of the seats in Lambeau, and if we call your seat number, you're playing on Sunday, right? That is the situation right here. Because it's not competition when the private schools, they get to pick who's going to be on their roster, and the public school is literally like, oh, you need an education? Come on in. We're here for you, right? That's not competition. It's not competition when public schools have to pay to have an annual audit, and private schools, we can't audit them. It's not competition when public schools have to obey open meetings laws and open records laws, but private schools don't have to do that. They get your money and they don't have to let you know what's going on in their programs, right?
Okay. So again, I mean, he again sidesteps into this idea that schools pick their students, which is, it's just bizarre. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that. I mean, look, I'm not like a political genius by any means. I'm not like a political guy. Like, I talk politics on here, but like, I'm not like, whatever. But like, I've just, even like the layman, like I've never heard somebody describe school as like schools picking students. This is just such a, I mean, that whole idea is just so warped. Whatever. I've talked about that already. To then say that is the thing, like he talks about competition, which I like at face value, I agree with. Like, yes, we should compete. Like that is the whole thing with like businesses, with schools, with healthcare, all of it. Like these businesses should compete for that because competition brings the best product. Public brings the worst product because there's no need, there's no drive. Like it's just such a backwards way to think about this. It's not competitive at all? The public school system. There's nothing competitive about that. The only people who are competing with that are the private schools. And when you have a public option, when you have this option, when you don't actually have a free market, when all the, let's just say like low, quote unquote, low middle tier education the opportunity for that is all sucked away by this private. Like, yes, of course you're going to see this displacement where there's like a very wealthy private school who can, can charge double what they are really worth, right? What's allowing that to happen is the public system. And let's look, what's the opposite of that? What's the opposite of that? Every school is public. What the hell is competitive about that? Having one type of education where every school has to adhere to certain policies. They're all price capped at a certain amount. Like, essentially, the education is the same for everybody. If you were to have like his worldview, I'm sure, which is like have public school available for everybody, there's nothing competitive about that. Zero, nil. Nothing is competitive about the public school system. So look, I agree with, and I look at like at face value, I agree with the criticism of like, yeah, it is really shitty that these private schools like just try to take all this money, like just gouge as much money from people as they can. And the fact that they like take this, and like I said in the beginning, like I don't think they should be getting public money. I don't think they should be getting tax dollars. Like I agree with that. But then what's the solution? The solution is not a public school system, a mass public school, giving more money to the public schools. That is not the answer. The answer is the free market. And as displayed right here, we are not going to see a Democratic governor push for that. And also, like the analogy with the sport. I mean, I don't even really want to get into that too much. But like the analogy with the sports, like, why would a sports team do that? Like let's say you have like two like really let's take the names away from it. Let's say you have sports team A, sports team B. Sports team A does it the right way where they want to they want to have a competitive market, and they're like, okay, we're going to find the best players and we're going to give them trials or whatever, right? And we're going to see who's the best and we're going to pay those people to perform. And then you have team B, which in this scenario he's painting has all the same resources. Like he's not claiming that like the Packers don't have the resources that the Bears do or whatever, right? Let's assume they have the same resources and they were just like, hey, we're just going to take everybody that tried out for sports and we're just going to randomly pick one or randomly pick however many team. If I'm understanding what the analogy correctly, like we're just going to pick like a handful randomly. What sports team would do that? That would be suicide. Nobody would like if there was a team who like wanted sponsors and people to back them financially, everyone would be like, no, fuck that. That's a terrible, like nobody's going to win like that. It's the same with the public school system. Like everybody knows that public school systems are shit. The only way that they're good is because of the individuals who have this outwardly like motivation to make it better. It's not because of the public school system that they're trying to make it better. It's because individuals recognize, oh, there's all these disparities, all these things that are disparaging in the system, and I'm going to do my best to make the best of it. Like, but they don't have to do that. The public school system allows them to fuck off. And basically, like, you don't have to, like, especially when you throw in, like, tenure and all the things that teachers have, like, you can be a shitty teacher in the public school system and get away with it. And nothing will happen to you. You will keep your job. You can work for years and years and decades, and you could do the shittiest job ever. And at the end of it, people won't only not criticize you for it, they will reward you. They will say, oh, look at this person for being a public school teacher. You know what happens in a private market, in a free market of education? If you do a shitty job, you lose your job, okay? If there's a school that hires teachers and they're doing a bad job, they fire them. And then they find better teachers, enabling better quality education. Nothing in the public school system is going to provide that. So the only way that you could sell this way is if you do exactly what Rob Sand is doing, which is creating this fantasy idea that schools pick their students. What the fuck? The only time that happens is in the public school system. And I wouldn't even say that. I wouldn't even go as far as to say that the schools pick them. The schools don't even pick them. What happens is you move into an area and the government comes in and says, okay, unless you want to pay for this private option, which is artificially expensive because we've undercut the market and we have taken all the free market out of it and just have a public system, we're going to force you to go to the same school that everybody else is going to in your area. Sorry. I mean, unless you can come up with the exorbitant amounts of money, right? Again, like, we'll just listen to the rest of this a little bit, but like, again, like, if you were to just say, hey, we should not be giving these private schools tax dollars. Yes, I 100% agree. But the way he has to paint after that is just what I find so disingenuous. So let's keep playing.
It's not competition when public schools have to take every student, and private schools don't have to. So again, is competition just a nice catchphrase, or does it actually explain what they're doing? It doesn't explain what they're doing. So what are we doing?
Okay, so you're saying that they should just take every student? What? And this is also like a very like pro-democratic, like the whole idea of rights, that like people have a right to education or a right to healthcare. I think it's just ridiculous. Like, look, I know it sounds harsh. I know it makes me sound like an asshole. I think it's ridiculous to think that just because people are existing, that they're entitled to something. I think when you have that mentality, then that's when you create public systems. That's when you create these monstrosities that just inflate the dollar, take people's livelihoods and money away, take away their ability to choose, and just make everything worse. Instead, you could just have a private, like, you could give people that choice. And yes, it's not a utopia. People are going to fall to the wayside, 100%. But it is better for everybody in the long run. I would much rather have that system that, you know, clears itself out and all the nooks and crannies and everything are worked out at the initial start than to have this problem just get pushed down the road. And then all of a sudden our grandkids are just left in poverty because there's no value to the dollar. And this is what happens when you have a public school system. So anyway.
What are we doing if we're not doing those things? We're literally creating a two-tiered education system in the state of Iowa where there's almost no accountability for how money gets spent by private schools that are publicly funded. Whereas public schools have a lot of things that they've got to do to be accountable to the public that private schools don't. That's not fair.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll just end there. It's not fair. It's not fair. Okay, sure. And look, to his end point, that is a fair criticism. What's your alternative, Rob? What's your alternative? Like in your scenario, you would probably give more money to the public. Because, I mean, look, I know, like he's said in the past, like he's not running as a Democrat candidate. Like he wants to, dissolute this two-party system, right? The fact is, he's still running on the Democratic ticket. If he gets into office, he's going to elect people who are Democratic, and they are going to have that mindset. They're going to have this approach to education where it needs to be public. And just for him to talk about competition in the same space of just like we're going to have a public system, like, yes, you can point out, like I was just saying, like you can point out the problem, but then your solution is we need to hold people to a standard. Like, no, you don't. You let the free market work. You let the free market work its magic. You say, okay, school A is charging $100,000 for your kid to go to kindergarten. That's ridiculous. Okay. Here's another school that's going to charge $20,000. And these are ridiculous numbers, but just roll with me here. Going to charge $20,000, and there's going to be another one that charges $50,000, and then another one charges $5,000. And those are all going to be different quality of educations based on that. But you know what's going to happen to that $100,000 school? They're not going to find any kids. They're not going to find any parents to give that money to them because it's a ridiculous proposition. Only in this system where we have a public option that doesn't cost anything, like up front, that is terrible quality, which you then have this gap of the private system. So like I said, I think overall, yes, we shouldn't be giving tax money to these private schools. But his logic, the way he paints it, is just it just doesn't make sense. It's illogical, it's false, and I find it disturbing that he would paint it like this. Because again, like if I'm wrong, tell me, but like I don't see any world where where schools are picking their students, where like private schools are just like going like door to door and be like, hey, you're gonna go to our school. They're not gonna try to sell it. They're not gonna be like, oh hey, like this is what we offer. None of that. They just show up to people's doors and they're like, hey, or they send them an email and they're like, hey, you're coming here. There's no world where that happens. I've never heard of that happening. The only way that would happen is in the public sphere. I'm repeating myself. So anyway, do I have any other points on him? No, we don't really have a lot of time. So let's just talk about this. Let's talk about this recent thing that happened. The big, beautiful bill. The big and beautiful bill. Lovely. The lovely, big, beautiful bill. Isn't it so big? Isn't it so beautiful? Ooh la la. Yeah, so this past Friday, I think it passed Friday. And, I've said this a million times, like, it's always funny. These things, they get talked through the whole week. And then on Fridays, they always get passed or whatever. So then everybody can just forget about it over the weekend. Well, we're not going to do that, people. We're the McAllister Hours. We don't forget about things over the weekend. I'm sober, okay? I remember things. So let's just look at this first article. House passes sweeping domestic policy package after Trump and Speaker Johnson win over holdouts. So this was something, the big beautiful bill, this was something that was like in contention. A lot of people talked about, negatively, having concerns about it. I know one thing that did look kind of positive about it was like, they were going to cut the taxing on tips, which that is a good thing. However, it comes at the cost of like billions, trillions of dollars being spent. I believe for military aid or military, I believe was what I remember. So I mean, it's this thing that government always likes to do is like, they'll throw you a bone, right? They'll throw you a bone. They'll say, hey, we're going to give you this, but we're actually going to take away so much more than what we're giving you. This happened. I mean, there's a reason these bills are 1,000 pages long. Like they give you the selling points without actually giving you the subtext, right? So let's just watch this clip really quick. This is the White House press secretary announcing this being passed. Let's play this.
Medicaid will no longer be used to pay for barbaric gender mutilation procedures on minor children. And the 1.4 million illegal aliens who are currently improperly receiving Medicaid benefits will be kicked off the program to preserve it for hardworking American citizens who need it. President Trump and Republicans are protecting Medicaid benefits for pregnant women, children, disabled individuals, low-income seniors and families, and the most vulnerable Americans in our society. And that's what Democrats are so angry about. Basic Medicaid protections that will stop the funding of transgender insanity and illegal aliens from ripping off American taxpayers.
And look, again, I mean, this goes back to what I was just talking about with Rob Sand, right? Like, at face value, like, yeah, I don't think, like, Medicaid should be going to, like, trans surgeries. Sorry. I don't think, like, public dollars should be going to that. I also don't think, I think there's a pretty good argument to say that, like, yeah, people who come to this country, like look, like I've said before, like I'm not a fan of the mass deportation stuff, but like also if you don't go through the procedure that people who are born here, people who did come to this country legally do, it's kind of ridiculous to think that you will reap those benefits. I mean, like the people who get those benefits, they give their personal information, they do a lot of different things, they go through a lot of different hoops, right? And it is kind of bullshit to just say like, okay, like people who don't do that, we're just going to give them like free money essentially, right? Not even free money. We're just going to like give them free services, like not actually free, but you know what I mean. And in the context that they're saying. So yeah, that's definitely fucky. But like, okay, like especially like exactly with the Rob Sand stuff, like, okay, so what's the solution? The real solution is to say, hey, we're gonna actually cut Medicaid for everybody. We're not just going to allocate it to the elderly or what. And, you know, that's a really funny thing, too, is like these essentially like medical welfare. I mean, for lack of a better term, let's just say medical welfare. That's essentially what healthcare is, or Medicaid is, or whatever, or Medicare. When you have like, it's almost like, it literally is like paying off your constituents, right? Like, everybody knows that, like, especially Republican, like, all their voters are, like, elderly people. So, like, you can paint it in this way where you're like, oh, we're giving money to elderly people. What they're really doing is they're giving money to the people who have their back, who vote for them, right? Like, they're not talking about, like, giving money to, like, I don't know, like, somebody in their 30s or 40s who has some health condition or, like, or, you know, it's just, you know, struggling, like, having a bad time paying their bills. And it's like, oh, maybe they could use a little healthcare help. I can wrap my head around that. But no, they never sell it like that. It's always for the elderly because, oh, look at the poor elderly. And this is the same card. This is why I like, you know, I'm talking about the Democrats, but like everybody does this shit. Like it's really hard to say like one's worse than the other because they're just worse in different ways. But there's something about like you know, like this lady, what she was saying, this lady who represents the Republican Party saying, we're not giving this to you. We're not giving this to you. Like they are being more, not even genuine, but like they're not afraid to say that they're not giving somebody something. The Democratic Party will always paint it as we're giving everybody everything. And that's just not accurate. So anyways, this is one of the things that the big and beautiful bill was sold on. So, I mean, you know, they paint all these things sound nice, but is coming at the cost of lots of taxpayer dollars. And, you know, Thomas Massie, someone who I've been rooting for, I'm a huge fan of. He has been seemingly the sole person in government who's actually voicing out these things, who's actually protesting these things. And Trump has gone, you know, he made a speech calling him not a speech. He had a TV spot where he was caught by reporters. He was calling him a grandstander, and he's been pushing for his removal. And I mean, this is something that's really divided his base. Like, thankfully, like, I'm glad that like people are actually like, hey, this is fucked up. Like, Trump shouldn't be doing this. But this is like a man who's like, you know, sure, he works for government. I'm sure he has his own agenda, or like, it wouldn't be shocking to me if he had some kind of his own agenda in there. But like, look, again, like I was giving praise to Rob Sand, like if you are in government and you're doing something that helps people, I think that's worth crediting. So we'll just play this clip and then we'll wrap this up because we're hitting the hour. I don't think anybody, usually I say if you want to drop a comment, I'll read at the end, but with Twitter, I don't really like, because I'm only streaming to Twitter, I don't really have the comments thing set up, so that might not be the case for this time. But yeah, let's just listen to this. I actually haven't listened to this, so let's play this, what Thomas Massie has to say about the big, beautiful bill.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 90 seconds.
Well, I'd love to stand here and tell the American people, we can cut your taxes and we can
so
increase
quiet.
spending and everything's going to be just fine. But I can't do that because I'm here to deliver a dose of reality. This bill dramatically increases deficits in the near term, but promises our government will be fiscally responsible 5 years from now. Where have we heard that before? How do you bind a future Congress to these promises? This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math, if it wants, but bond investors don't. And this week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy our debt and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on the 10-year note, the 20-year note, and the 30-year note. What does this mean? Very soon, the government will be paying $16,000 of interest alone per U.S. family. And what are we telling them? Instead of taking care of that problem, we're going to give you a $1,600 tax break. Under the taxing and spending levels in this bill, we're going to rack up, the authors say, $20 trillion of new debt.
Holy shit.
Over the next 10 years. I'm telling you, it's closer to $30 trillion of new debt in the next 10 years. Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg. If something is beautiful, you don't do it after midnight. I oppose this bill.
That's actually hilarious. Something's beautiful, you don't do after midnight. Yeah, I mean, look, I think this ties actually really beautifully into the, what we're talking about with Rob Sand. Like, this is the bone that they throw. They're like, oh, hey, we're gonna make these tax cuts. We're gonna hey, like with the thing with the schools, like, hey, we're gonna take this money away from the public, from the private school. Like both those things, like I would, like at face value, I would agree with. Like, yes, we should give people tax cuts. We should not give money to public money to private schools. But then what's the underlying thing that's happening? You're just making things more expensive over time. Was it? I think he said in 10 years we're going to have $30 trillion of debt. That's fucking insane. Big is right. That part of the bill is named correctly. Definitely big. Not beautiful. And look, again, like this is something you can look at the same thing with the public school thing. I'm a broken record at this point with this, but like it sounds nice to say we're going to take money away from these private schools, these really rich and corrupt private schools, and we're going to give it to this pool on the public school, even though it's going to make everything more expensive, and down the line it's going to devalue education even more than it really is. But hey, in the short term, it's going to be good, right? Okay, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. I apologize for the lateness. I don't know what the hell's going on with my YouTube. I need to get to the bottom of that because it was saying that I wasn't eligible for something, and then it said I was, but like apparently I can't stream, so like I don't know what the hell's going on. So I'm gonna chop this up and put it on YouTube right now. So anyways, thank you guys all for tuning in. Have a good night. Peace.